You need to think about this. How far do the personal moral failings of a politician disqualify them to be worthy of your vote? Well, no one has seen the answer to that closely, more so than Megyn Kelly, who herself has a pretty testy history with Donald Trump over precisely this question. Watch how she shut down this New York Times host trying to corner Megyn over her support for Trump now, because I think it leads to so many more questions we need to ask.
I just want to understand something clearly. Donald Trump was found liable for sexual abuse in a civil court. He's been accused by many women. You don't believe any of that?
I think the most serious thing I've heard about him has been the Megyn Kelly allegation that he sexually assaulted her in a Bergdorf dressing room. And I don't believe one word of that.
There's
Not
many.
one word.
There are other women who have said.
I know. I've interviewed some of them. But look, the things I heard were included things like he got handsy on an airplane. Now, I don't know whether that happened or it didn't. But do I find that a deal breaker for a possible politician? Not really. At least I reported on their stories and did them the courtesy of bringing them to air in front of millions of people and let the audience make up its mind. My problem is more with these Democrats who will bury these allegations against their candidates or their candidates' spouses and then play holier than thou when they're looking at Donald Trump.
Do you see yourself as a journalist still? Or would you not describe yourself like
I'm
that
still
anymore?
A journalist. I mean, I break news all the time. And when I sit with Trump or anybody else in the administration, I ask tough questions. I mean, as recently as September of 23, I interviewed Trump and he got so mad at me, he didn't talk to me for 6 or 7 months. So it's not, look, it's a tough job to do. You have to be able to hit the people you admire. And I do. You know, I've hit them all. Right before the election, I ripped on Trump's Madison Square Garden rally as too brotastic and got specific about why.
You know where I think the answer lies? It's not that you need to cover for Donald Trump over his personal moral failings or that his base actively voted for someone of that character, as many on the left would have you believe. It's that all of these allegations and trials, like the Megyn Kelly case, happened at a time when trust in the media, judiciary, and political system was at absolutely zero for the average voter. How do you expect, for example, the common man struggling to make ends meet to untangle the mess that was the Megyn Kelly case, especially considering it was from an obscure event in the mid-90s and Megyn herself made some questionable statements with Anderson Cooper? Besides, the case was funded by one of the largest Democrat donors named Reid Hoffman, who was also allegedly on the flight logs for Epstein's island. How many contradictions like this can the average voter juggle before they just give up and vote based on their life's moral proximal issues? By the way, we're having some really important conversations of our time here at Millionaire Mentor, so please be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss out. Now, you have to give props to Megyn Kelly for now allowing herself to be this coffee-sipping armchair commentator to someone that actually sees things from the average voter's vantage point.
If you haven't sold your soul, you have to be willing to criticize the people, even that you admire, on your, quote, side. And my owning my bias by going out there on stage with Donald Trump and saying, I'm voting for him and you should too, is a bonus when it comes to my credibility. Now, everybody has zero doubt about where I stand, and they can filter everything I say through the appropriate lens. What typically happens in journalism is they say they have no bias, and then they just work it out in the printed word or on their shows without owning it. But the audience knows it, and it creates a distrust and a divide. When it comes to Trump and me, no, my own personal opinion is most of the allegations against him are much more complicated than the mainstream media would have you believe. And I don't think Donald Trump is a racist or a sexual assaulter. I do think he's taken inappropriate liberties with women and gotten handsy with them in a way he's owned himself. Okay, years ago when he was a celebrity, and it is what it is. That's the past.
And that is the other end for why the American electorate at large just didn't care that much about these scandals, even back when the Access Hollywood tape came out in 2016, which polls show that most of his base doesn't really think that's a deal breaker for a president. Besides, the blunt truth is they weren't going to be lectured or morally cornered over it by a party that tried to slip under the rug any talk of the allegations against Joe Biden made by people like Tara Reid, or the scandals of Hunter Biden that were almost systematically suppressed before the 2020 election. And what makes it more interesting is that Megyn Kelly's developed an appreciation for that broader perspective after leaving the mainstream media, even though she's had quite a lot of friction with the president before.
What I say is what I say. And honestly, Megyn, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me.
He felt attacked. It wasn't an attack. It was a fair question. But I get it. And he's in the arena, and so am I. So it's okay with me that there's, some consternation. I'm sure he'll get over that, and we'll be fine, and so will America.
I might be the best thing that ever happened to her. I don't know, because whoever even heard of her before the last debate. But I thought she was very unfair in the last debate. A lot of people said I won that debate. Everybody said I won the last debate. But I'm not a fan of Megyn Kelly. I don't like her. She probably doesn't like me, and that's okay. But she better be fair. I'd like to go to the debate. I enjoy the debates. I've done well in the debates. Every single poll has said I've won every debate.
And that's just what Trump is. That's the whole package that America bought into. I remember Jordan Peterson said something that really stuck with me, which is that for every single positive personality trait that you can find, there's a shadow side to it. It's the other side of the coin, and you can't have one without the other. If you're empathetic, it comes with a degree of neuroticism and moral anxiety. If you're creative, you can sometimes struggle with discipline. And if you're courageous, you can be harsh and too upfront at times. That's what Donald Trump is. He's the good with the bad.
It's just about so much more than that. We are talking about how many people dying at the southern border because of the invasion that we've suffered under Joe Biden. We're talking about Laken Riley, whose killer was let in under Biden. We put him on a taxpayer flight down to Georgia where he murdered her. I don't give a about Trump getting handsy with somebody 20 years ago. I want someone who will close the border, which he has. I want someone who will keep boys out of my daughter's sports, which he has. I want someone who will stand up to the insane DEI policies so that white kids will stop hearing in school that they're born with some original sin from which they cannot recover, which he has.
And honestly, Americans in practical terms have two options for candidates because the smaller parties and independents just never break through. And that means it's about picking the better of two suboptimal choices and deciding what issues and policies impact your life more directly. Anyone looking for a saint would never be able to vote again because the only thing that you can do is recognize shortcomings as a part of your holistic choice and not defend someone purely based on tribal bias. And maybe that's the problem with the modern Democrat mindset that even this host displayed next, which is sitting on a comfortable moral cushion instead of meeting the American people where they are.
You really think it's fair game that you as a journalist ask a fair question based on things that he'd said, and he put you through that for a whole year? You think that's fair?
Look, I've been very public about thinking he went too far. That's how I felt at the time. And if I could go back and undo it, I would. But I have a better perspective on why it happened now. It was actually an important piece of his rise within the Republican Party in the primary. And it just showed people what a fighter he was. The same guy who got up bloodied in Butler, Pennsylvania, was the guy who was like a dog with a bone with me, who wouldn't let it go. He's got this fighter instinct. And if you cross him or if you do something he finds unjust, he will stay on you until he's satisfied the thing's been resolved to his satisfaction.
And that is the full package this country voted for and got in the end. The only thing that you can do is at least be aware of where that boundary lies and what parts of that choice are just not worth defending just to be able to justify it. But tell me in the comments if you agree, because I think this is one of the greatest antidotes to modern political tribalism at a time like this.